You are the best part of every single day. You know that?
I know, Daddy. You tell me every morning.
Hey, stranger.
Hey,
Car getting a bath. She was starting to look like
she'd driven through the entire continental United States. Nobody sat across from me at dinner in 14 months.
Well, somebody is now.
Hi, Daddy.
Okay, here we go.
Whee!
You're flying, sweetie.
I love you.
Exhausted single dad dragged himself home. His neighbor was washing her car when she said something that stopped him cold, based on a true story that touched millions. Which part of this story made you feel the most sadness or happiness? Where are you watching from? And how did you like the story? Tell us in the comments. Exhausted single dad dragged himself home. His neighbor's words changed everything.
Ryan Calloway had not eaten a real meal since Tuesday. It was now Thursday evening, and as he turned his truck onto Birchwood Lane, he could not actually remember if he had eaten anything at all today or if the granola bar he found in his jacket pocket at noon counted as a meal. He decided it probably did not.
He decided he also did not have the energy to care. He was 29 years old, and he felt 53. The drive home from the warehouse took 40 minutes on a good day. Today was not a good day. A fender bender on the I-94 had pushed it to just over an hour, and for that entire hour Ryan had sat in near stationary traffic with the radio off, his hands loose on the wheel, staring at the taillights of the SUV in front of him, and thinking about absolutely nothing, because thinking about anything required more from him than he currently had to give. In the cup holder beside him sat a paper cup of gas station coffee he had bought 3 hours ago and forgotten about. He picked it up. It was cold. He drank it anyway. Ryan was a single father. Had been for 14 months, since the morning his wife Jess sat down across from him at the kitchen table and told him very calmly that she needed to leave, that she was not happy, that she had not been happy for a long time. He had not seen it coming, which was the part that still got him sometimes in quiet moments. The way something enormous can be building right next to you, and you are so busy with the 10,000 small tasks of living that you simply do not see it. He never blamed Lily for any of it. His daughter was 6 years old, bright-eyed, furiously curious about butterflies and dinosaurs and whether or not the moon was actually a nightlight for the whole world. She had Jess's freckles and Ryan's stubbornness, and an imagination so large it seemed to strain the walls of their small house on Birchwood Lane. Jess saw Lily every other weekend. The arrangement had been civil. Everything about the divorce had been civil, which Ryan sometimes thought was almost worse than if it had been a war. At least a war would have given him something to be angry at instead of just this low, persistent ache that had no clean edges. Lily was the reason he got up. She was also the reason he had worked back-to-back double shifts at the warehouse this week. One of her back molars needed a crown, $420 after insurance, and her school field trip to the Science Museum was $55 he had said yes to without doing the math first. He had done the math after and realized that saying yes meant protein bars for dinner 3 nights running and pretending he was not hungry when Lily asked why he wasn't eating. He was always hungry lately. He pulled into the driveway and sat in the truck. He did this every evening, just sat for a minute. Not because he was avoiding anything on the other side of that front door. Lily was the greatest thing in his life, and walking into her felt like the first real breath of the entire day. But because he needed 60 seconds to take off the weight of the outside world and remember who he was supposed to be at home. The man inside that house needed to be present and warm and capable of enthusiasm for a drawing of a stegosaurus, and patient enough to explain for the 4th time this week why we do not feed the neighbor's cat grass. He needed 60 seconds to become that man again. He was reaching for his paper cup when he noticed movement next door. His neighbor, Claire Matthews, 28, physical therapist, moved in about 6 months ago, was in her driveway washing her red Honda. She had a green garden hose in both hands, spraying suds off the hood, and beside her on the pavement sat a blue bucket and a yellow sponge. She was wearing a cream-ribbed sweater and a denim miniskirt, her curly dark hair loose around her face, and she was humming something he couldn't quite make out from inside the truck. She hadn't noticed him yet. Ryan pushed the door open and stepped out, cup in hand. The sound of the truck door made Claire turn. She looked over her shoulder, and when she saw him, her face shifted immediately from casual concentration into a smile. Warm, real, the kind that reached her eyes without having to work at it. "Hey, stranger," she said. "Hey." His voice came out flatter than he intended. He cleared his throat. "Car getting a bath? Long overdue." She gestured at the red Honda with the hose. She was starting to look like she'd driven through the continental United States. Ryan managed something close to a smile. He was halfway up his front walk when Claire spoke again. "You okay?" He stopped. It was such a simple question. 2 words. The kind people asked 100 times a day without really meaning it, without actually waiting for the answer. A social reflex dressed up as concern. He had answered it 200 times this week. Fine, good, little tired. You know how it is. But something about the way Claire said it stopped him. She had turned all the way around. She was not still spraying the car. She was not looking at her phone or halfway distracted by something else. She was just looking at him fully. The way people rarely looked at anyone anymore. Ryan turned back toward her. "Rough week," he said. Claire tilted her head slightly. "How rough?" He laughed, short and dry. "The kind where you eat a granola bar for lunch and convince yourself it counts." She did not laugh back. She looked at him for a moment, and then she set the hose down carefully on the driveway, crossed her arms loosely over her sweater, and said, "When did you last have an actual dinner?" Ryan opened his mouth, closed it, genuinely tried to remember. "Monday," he said finally. "Lily and I had spaghetti. It's Thursday. I'm aware." Claire was quiet for a moment. She looked at him the way someone looks at a problem they are quietly deciding whether to solve. Then she said in a very matter-of-fact voice, "I made a full pot of chicken soup this afternoon. Way too much for one person. Come over after Lily's in bed." Ryan blinked. "Claire, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to," she said. "I want to. There is a difference." He did not know what to do with that. He had spent 14 months in a world where everything came with a transaction built into it. You asked for help, you owed something, you leaned on someone, you became a burden. He had gotten very good at not asking, at making himself smaller, at insisting he was fine until fine became the only gear he had. A woman offering him chicken soup because she wanted to was apparently enough to make him stand in his own front yard and feel completely at a loss. "Ryan," Claire's voice was gentle but clear, "you're holding a cup of cold gas station coffee at 7 in the evening and you look like you haven't slept since the Obama administration. Let someone feed you." He stared at her. "After Lily's in bed," she said again, "just knock." Lily was in spectacular form that evening. She had apparently decided that today was the day to fully commit to her theory that the moon was a nightlight installed by sky workers, and she presented her case at the dinner table. Boxed mac and cheese, which Ryan had made on autopilot, with the confidence of a woman who had done her research. "There is no other explanation," Lily said firmly, pointing her fork at him. "Astronomers might disagree with you," Ryan said. "Astronomers haven't met me," said Lily. He laughed. Really laughed, not the tired performance of laughter he had been managing at the warehouse all week. Lily looked pleased with herself and went back to her mac and cheese. And Ryan watched her for a moment, this small, ridiculous, extraordinary person across the table, and felt the week loosen its grip on him by a single notch. He got her through her bath, her 3 books, and a lengthy negotiation about whether her stuffed rabbit, Gerald, needed a blanket of his own or could share. Gerald got his own blanket. It was a small price for peace. By 9:15, the house was quiet. Ryan stood in the kitchen for a moment, then he walked next door and knocked. Claire opened the door almost immediately, like she had been nearby. She was still in the sweater, though she had changed into leggings, and the smell from inside the house was something so deeply, specifically comforting, garlic and thyme and warm broth, that Ryan felt it physically. "Good timing," she said, "just reheated it." They sat at her small kitchen table with 2 bowls of chicken soup, and Claire poured him a glass of water and did not make a production out of any of it. She did not look at him with the particular expression he had learned to dread, the soft, careful, tilted head look that meant "you poor thing." She just sat across from him and passed him the bread and asked him about the warehouse and actually listened to his answers. He told her about the equipment that kept jamming. He told her about his supervisor who communicated exclusively through passive aggression and clipboard gestures. He told her about Lily's tooth and the field trip and the granola bar. He told her more than he planned to tell anyone, and she received all of it without drama, without pity, without making him feel like a problem. At some point she said, You know what I think is actually hard about being a single parent? He looked up. Not the logistics, she said. The logistics are brutal, but people understand logistics. What's hard is that there's no one to tell the small things to, like, Lily said something funny today and you want to tell someone and there's no one there. That's the part no one talks about. Ryan put his spoon down. He had never heard anyone name it that precisely. He had not been able to name it himself. But she had just taken something that had been sitting shapeless and heavy in his chest for 14 months and put clean, exact language to it, and the relief of being understood so specifically by someone who was not even trying particularly hard to understand him was almost more than he knew what to do with. Yeah, he said quietly. That's exactly it. Claire nodded. You're doing a good job, Ryan, she said. With Lily, I see you two in the mornings, the way she looks at you. She paused. Kids only look at their parents like that when they feel safe, just so you know. He looked at the bowl in front of him, pressed his hand flat on the table and took a slow breath. Thank you, he said, for... He gestured vaguely at the soup, the table, the whole quiet, ordinary evening of it. Thank you for finally coming over, she said simply. He walked home at 10:30 under a sky full of stars. At the front door, he paused and looked up. Thought about Lily's theory, sky workers installing a giant nightlight for the whole world. He smiled. For the first time in 14 months, he did not feel like he was carrying the whole thing alone. Sometimes the most powerful thing a person can offer is not a solution. It is a bowl of soup, a seat at the table, and the rare radical act of paying full attention. In a world moving faster than most of us can manage, that is everything.